Chapter 3. The Talk. He is a fantastic actor. He just has poor directing, she remarked. As soon as the words left her mouth, she felt Irvin's gaze on her and looked over to meet his eyes. Stephen approached them excitedly.
Miss Skylar, you are a lifesaver. I was completely blown away by watching the two main characters act in this scene. The male lead's irritation towards the female lead and his love and desire for her were portrayed beautifully. I never thought a scene could depict aggression and passion so brilliantly.
Skylar nodded and replied, "That's the message of this scene." Stephen applauded, showing his appreciation. He then turned to Irvin and pointed his finger in an aggressive manner, questioning him.
Why was it so hard for you to pinpoint this?
Irvin sauntered over to the group with his hands casually tucked into his pockets.
You know, Stephen, you're right.
He conceded.
I've been so caught up in the technical side of filming that I've neglected to give the actors proper direction.
He shifted his gaze to Skylar and added,
I appreciate you pointing that out to me, Skylar D. Katz.
Skylar's mouth fell open when she saw Irvin arch an eyebrow at her. It was the first time he'd used her full name. He was totally bantering, which made Skylar also excited. She met his stare head-on and retorted, "You're welcome, but filming is a different story. It's about capturing emotions accurately. Someone without emotions would struggle to do that." Irvin's expression changed at her words. Skylar pressed on. Compassion, empathy, sympathy. Those are the emotions you need to tap into, don't you agree? Skylar's words might have led bystanders to believe that she was pointing out Irvin's lack of emotion. However, Irvin was all too aware that her words carried a deeper meaning. He knew she was mocking him about their shared history, and the implication of her words left him feeling wronged, upset, and even sad. Irvin felt disappointed that Skylar still seemed to view him in such a negative light. It seemed that she was still holding on to old grudges and resentments. In the meantime, Stephen stood there in absolute shock. His jaw dropped as he couldn't believe what he was witnessing. After a few seconds, he finally found his voice and said to Skylar,
Believe it or not, you're the first person who's ever had the guts to say that to him. No one in the facility dared to make such a remark.
Skylar was stunned and she asked, "No one?" Stephen was about to say something, but Irvin grabbed him by the back of his shirt and pushed him aside.
Enough, Stephen. Go help everyone prepare for the next scene,
Irvin ordered.
Okay, but wait. Ethan, come with me.
Stephen rushed to Ethan, put his arm around his shoulder, and dragged him away, leaving Irvin and Skylar alone. Skylar narrowed her eyes at Irvin and asked, "Why does no one dare to say anything to you? What is so intimidating about you?" She slowly walked closer to him, examining him from head to toe. "I thought you were just someone who ran away from problems," Skylar said. Irvin furrowed his brows, avoiding eye contact and biting his lips. He seemed angry, and Skylar knew she had hit a nerve.
Sky, I believe your job is done and may leave now,
stated Irvin, a bit of anger in his tone. A sudden frown spread across Skylar's face as she realized she had gone too far. She didn't want to upset him, but she couldn't help it. I'm sorry." Skylar's sudden apology took Irvin aback. He knew her well enough to understand that she never apologized that quickly, significantly when she believed she was right. He indeed left her 5 years ago. He never felt good about it. "Are you sure you don't need any more help?" she asked, hoping he would change his mind. Irvin hesitated for a moment before responding.
You've done enough, Skylar. I appreciate your help, but I can take it from here.
Okay, but don't make it seem like you have called for my aid only to dismiss me. Could it be that you are only acting in your own self-interest? Irvin looked at her, surprised by her accusation.
That's not true, Skylar. I genuinely needed your help, and I am grateful for it.
Skylar stared angrily at him, clearly mad.
You're welcome to stay if you want,
Irvin told her, changing his mind.
I would actually prefer that.
Skylar's heart raced as a new emotion stirred inside her. Did Irvin just say he wanted her to stay? She couldn't help but feel curious and asked him directly, "You would prefer me to stay?" Their eyes met, and he replied without hesitation,
In case I require your assistance.
Skylar's heart sank as disappointment washed over her. She had hoped that he had another reason for wanting her to stay. With a heavy sigh, she said, "Fine, then I'll leave." Skylar began to walk away, but as she glanced back, she caught Irvin's eyes following her. He quickly looked away, but it was too late. She could sense that he knew he was caught. Skylar's frustration grew, and she couldn't hold back any longer. In a loud and breaking voice, she asked, "Irvin Yun, why did you break up with me?" The question hung in the air, causing heads to turn and all eyes to fall on them. Irvin looked stunned, as if he hadn't expected her to ask that question boldly.
What?
His voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes were still fixed on Irvin's as she walked back to him. "I am doing fine without you," she said, her voice steady now. "But that doesn't mean I'm better off without you. You hurt me, Irvin. You left me when I needed you the most. And now you're telling me that it was all for my own good? I don't believe you." The crew members and actors exchanged glances, unsure of how to react to the unexpected confrontation between the director and the writer. Irvin's eyes darted around, realizing that they were the center of attention, but the intensity of Skylar's gaze kept him rooted in place. The crew watched the scene unfold, their attention now shifted from the film to the real-life drama playing out in front of them. "Say something!" urged Skylar, attempting to break the unbearable silence that had descended upon them. Irvin gripped her arm, pleading with her to stop.
"Not now, Sky.
He whispered, his voice barely audible.
Please."
Skylar couldn't help but feel mixed emotions as she looked into Irvin's eyes. Her anger slowly dissipated as she saw a deep sense of pain and distress etched on his face. It was the same face he had always worn whenever he feared that Skylar might cause trouble, and it always made her feel scared of losing his love. She also couldn't ignore the painful reminder that this face brought her, the frustration and heartbreak that had led to the end of their relationship. But moreover, as she looked at him, she couldn't help but feel a sense of longing for what they once had. Memories of their past love flooded her mind, and she couldn't hold back the tears that welled up in her eyes. Irvin, too, felt his heart shatter into a million pieces as he watched Skylar cry. Seeing her hurt almost brought him to his knees. Despite his frustration towards her, he strongly wanted to protect her. But what could he do? What rights does he have? He was the one who walked away, and now he was left feeling helpless. Without his consent, he slowly lifted his other hand to her face and was about to wipe her tears just when Ethan pulled her away.
"Sorry, Director Irvin,"
said Ethan.
"Skylar has an appointment to get to."
Irvin's eyes darted back at Skylar, and she got behind Ethan, busy wiping her tears.
"We'll take our leave."
He turned, put his hand behind Skylar's back, and began to walk her out. Irvin watched helplessly as Ethan led Skylar away, his heart heavy with regret. He knew he had caused Skylar pain yet again, and he couldn't just leave it at that. In an impulsive moment, he ran after them and seized Skylar's hand, surprising her.
"Sky, wait.
Irvin exclaimed, staring intensely into her eyes.
We will have that talk. I promised you that."
He assured her, his voice full of desperation and sincerity. At that moment, Skylar wanted to lash out at him, to tell him not to make promises he couldn't keep. But as Irvin wiped away the leftover tears on her face with his thumb, she felt her emotions shifted. A glimmer of hope flickered in her heart, like a tiny flame struggling to take hold in a gusty wind. Skylar and Ethan got home that evening. She was about to go to her room downstairs, but Ethan stopped her by saying,
"Miss Katz, you made a promise that you will stay professional. What made you burst out like that? Now the whole facility knows that you once dated that director."
Skylar looked at Ethan apologetically. She didn't know what got her to burst out. She dropped her body to the sofa and covered her eyes with one of her forearms. I don't know, Ethan, Skylar groaned. I'm just so mad at myself. Ethan looked down at her, sympathy evident in his eyes.
He's not just an ex, huh?
He said.
You really do care about him. Everything he does affects you a lot.
Skylar shot up from lying and denied, "No," before sighing in defeat and laying back down. Yes, she admitted quietly. Ethan plopped himself on a chair, looking visibly frustrated. He then leaned forward and sat across from Skylar, staring at her intently.
I just don't get it. Why on earth is he so irresponsible?
Skylar stared at the ceiling, feeling exhausted and overwhelmed. Despite what Ethan said, good memories of Irvin popped and flashed through her mind like popcorn. His smile, stare, touch, everything of him was still so vivid. Skylar's voice quivered as she began. He was a good man. A very good man. Ethan was perplexed, wondering why she would say that about someone who had hurt her so much. But there was something in her tone that made him curious, something that suggested that the man was more than just a source of pain. With a sigh, Ethan stood up and said,
Well, I guess that explains why you're both still single. But right now, I'm starving. I need to eat.
He headed towards the kitchen. Skylar's eyes lit up as she sat up and called after him. Hey, could you cook something for me too, please? Ethan didn't reply. Instead, he gave her a nod. She smiled at Ethan, and she laid back down, eyes half open. The memory of Irvin's face on the filming set, complete with pain and distress, crossed her mind. Although Irvin wore that face most of the time back then, his eyes still reflected sincerity, tenderness, and bittersweetness. She wondered if Irvin still had feelings for her. 7 years ago. Students were grabbing snacks or catching up on last-minute studying in the break room on a typical Friday afternoon on campus. Skylar and Irvin sat in the middle of the chaos after finishing their classes. As they sat at the small table, Skylar was animatedly recounting a funny story from her psychology class, while Irvin listened attentively, a small smile on his lips. Skylar's hands were moving frantically as she recounted her experience to Irvin. And then, out of nowhere, the professor decides to spring a pop quiz on us. I swear my brain just froze. How was I supposed to know the concept of operant conditioning on the spot? Irvin chuckled.
Relax. I'm sure you nailed it. You're the smartest person I know.
Skylar rolled her eyes. Please, you're just saying that. You're the psychology whiz here, not me. Irvin shook his head.
Don't sell yourself short. You're brilliant in your own way.
Just as they were about to continue, another student plopped down at the table next to them. They exchanged polite nods before turning back to each other. Irvin took a sip of his water and turned to Skylar.
So, how was your day?
Skylar let out a sigh. It was all right. The usual lectures and group project meetings. You know, I'm not too fond of those. I don't have friends to partner with. Irvin frowned, knowing how much Skylar hated group projects.
Well, at least it's the weekend now. We can relax and have some fun.
Skylar's face lit up at the mention of the weekend. Yes, finally! Maybe we can go eat or catch a movie. Irvin nodded, feeling proud that he could bring a smile to her face. Suddenly he got lost in her eyes and couldn't help but stare at her with a soft gaze. Skylar noticed his expression and leaned closer to him. I wonder, how many girls have you looked at with those dreamy eyes? Irvin reached for Skylar's hand and gently squeezed it.
There's only one girl, named Sky.
Back to the present, Skylar woke up from her dream, realizing she was still on the sofa. She sat up, holding her spinning head, and found her dinner on the coffee table. She saw the note where Ethan left it for her. She grabbed it and read it. The note says,
Miss Katz, I didn't want to wake you up, so make sure to eat after your nap.
Skylar smiled as she checked her phone for the time. It was 9 p.m. She dozed off for 3 hours? How will she be able to fall asleep tonight? The day was cold. Leaves fall from trees, making the outdoors look so colorful. Skylar walked into the cozy bookstore, the smell of books filling her nostrils. She had come here with a specific purpose in mind, to find answers about Irvin. As an aspiring author, Skylar was always curious about the workings of the human mind, and she couldn't help but wonder what was going on in Irvin's head. She hoped that by reading books about the male psyche, she could gain insight into what had caused their breakup. Did he still think about her? Was he happy without her? These questions plagued her every day, and she was desperate for answers. Skylar browsed through the shelves, her eyes scanning the titles of books that tell a man's mind. She picked up a few and started flipping through the pages, hoping to find some answers. But the more she read, the more confused she became. Every book has a different theory, and none of them apply to Irvin. A familiar voice interrupted her thoughts just as she grabbed a handful of books, about to head toward the register.
Miss Skylar, is that you?
Irvin's assistant Stephen appeared behind her, startled to see her, and she looked at him with astonishment. "What is he doing here?" she asked in silence. "Hi, Stephen," she said, forcing a smile.
Hey, it's been a week, but you still have my name. I'm honored.
Said Stephen excitingly.
So, what are you doing here?
"Nothing," Skylar answered quickly. "What are you doing here?"
Oh, we have a meeting in the next door building. Unfortunately, our client is running late, so we're just here to buy time.
Answered Stephen, and took a gathering at Skylar's books.
So, what books are you reading?
Startled, Skylar fumbled with her books, trying to hide the titles from Stephen. She could feel her cheeks burning with embarrassment. "Oh, just browsing," she replied, trying to sound nonchalant. Stephen raised an eyebrow, clearly not convinced.
Are you sure about that? You seem to be looking for something specific.
Skylar's heart raced as she desperately tried to devise an excuse. But before she could say anything, she saw Irvin standing a few feet away, looking at her with a mix of surprise and curiosity. Panic set in as Skylar tried to figure out a way to escape. She couldn't face Irvin, not now, not when he was about to catch her red-handed reading books indicating him. She needed to get away. I have to go," she stammered, clumsily trying to gather her books and make a run for it. But Stephen stopped her, blocking her path.
Wait, let me help you with those,
he said, gesturing to her pile of books. Skylar's heart sank as she quickly refused. "No need, I'm just putting them away." Stephen stood there, not bulging.
Well, let me help you put them away.
Skylar sighed, realizing that there was no way out. She reluctantly handed him the books, feeling defeated. She will buy the books another time. As Stephen helped put the books away, she couldn't help stealing a glance at Irvin. He was still watching her, his expression unreadable.
These books are quite interesting,
Stephen said with a knowing smile. Skylar shifted her attention back to him. "I'm trying to understand what goes on in a man's mind," Skylar murmured with a hint of relent. Stephen chuckled.
Well, good luck with that. I don't think even we men understand our own minds.
They both laughed, and Skylar found Stephen quite a fun guy. Then she noticed Irvin walking in their direction, and she panicked. She needed to get away. But as she turned to leave, she tripped over her own feet and fell to the ground. To make matters worse, the heel of her shoe came off, leaving her feeling even more embarrassed. "Great. Just great," she muttered to herself. She could feel Irvin's eyes on her, and she wished she could just disappear into thin air.